Okay, I'll make a start. Thank you, first of all, very much for coming to my session. I'm really touched because of the selection available to us. So thank you very much. And I really hope that even if I do a similar sort of rattle through the slides as we had, you'll be able to take something away from this session. And certainly at the end, I do want you to feed into what I've been talking about and what I'm doing, and what I'm thinking about it. So I'm Daniel Ayres. That's me. I'm on Twitter, and if you're connected, then please feel free to tweet. It will actually come up on my screen, so you can give me formative feedback in the moment. I'm at the University of East London. Our Stratford campus is up here near the Olympic Park. And sorry, this was the first picture that I got of East London. Our Docklands campus is there above the Royal Docks. You've got Greenwich here, Newham here. We're surrounded by Tower Hamlets, Hackney, Redbridge, Barking and Dagenham, Havering. We're out to Essex this way. And these are the boroughs that we serve in our capacity as teacher educators. The aims of this session to share the evolution and investigate the impact of a master's level module on our primary ITT programs within CAS. It's a work in progress, so note down any thoughts and comments for the end of, towards the end of the session. I'll start off though with basically the structure of the program. It's going to be undergoing revalidation for September, and it looks something like this. The top 4 modules are 15 credit level 6 modules, including a school-based learning which tackles practical skills in school, and it also includes a subject-specific area. We have 11 primary with routes, which are validated subject specialisms, if you like. So, for example, trainees can leave us with primary PGC with English, maths, music, and special educational needs, and there's 11 or 12 of those. The bottom 3 are 30 credits masters modules. The middle one is the one that I'm module leader for, and that's the one that I'm going to be focusing on in just a sec. We're thinking of offering them as a bit of a menu to trainees in September. I'm not entirely sure how that's going to work, but here's hoping. The evolution of them over the last 4 or 5 years has been quite interesting, I think. It started out with a requirement for postgraduate courses to include master's level credits. So we validated one subject knowledge module and a reflective practice module, which turned into this. Actually, it's evolved into this. The subject knowledge one was dropped, I think, for reasons of scope, practicalities as well, and replaced with another reflective practice one, the critical incidents in teaching, which is based on David Tripp's approaches to analysing professional experience. The managing professional change module was initially focusing on behaviour for learning in order to tackle that priority in initial teacher education, address Ofsted requirements, things like that, but and also the trainees' needs, particularly at the start of their programme, to explore issues of behaviour. We opened it up a little bit more broadly, though, to give them a bit more flexibility, and it turned into a reflective practice module. But last year I submitted module amendment to change it from reflective practice to systematic inquiry, and that's what I'm looking at now. And so actually the trainees, to demonstrate the outcomes of this, will be submitting a 4,500 word assignment describing a small scale research project on a topic related to their PWR, including things like literature, research activity, reflective conclusions, evaluation, but also, significantly, an intervention action plan which we require them to append. We kind of acknowledge that they can't necessarily implement a full action research cycle in schools because of the limits of their context, but some of them have. Others basically access the M-levelness through evaluating the whole process they're reading and the justification for the intended actions. The drivers, why do it? Why change it from reflective practice to action research and research? Well, I heard this morning that BERA RSA have released their final report into the role of research in education, and that's their inquiry, part of the driver for me, but also NQT questions, which require us now to ask trainees to comment on the way we've prepared them to assess their own research. But more about that at 2:15, if you fancy coming along to my workshop, which I'm running with my colleague Andrew Reid, who's amongst us. We're going to look at the reasons behind this refocusing onto research. So come along, that's in room 144, I think. Am I allowed to do that? I don't think I am. No, done it. Yeah. I need an academic nod to my perspective. This is a little extract from a little article I knocked up for Research in Teacher Education, which can be accessible there. And basically, I value the role that plentiful experience can bring to teacher education. However, the expert procedures, which I think include specific evaluation models, TRIP, and formulaic approaches to analysis of experience even, I think can limit the need for critical thinking. And they don't require, according to Schoen, learners to form their own stance, possibly inhibiting formation of pedagogical content knowledge, which, and this is my conceptual framework that I knocked up after doing that article. Usually when you look for conceptual models of pedagogical content knowledge, which is some of the outcome of the combination of different ingredients, you see it as a Venn diagram. And I didn't really like that. I see it more of as a process, so a combining, a mixing of these elements with these. Anyway, look, that's just really me showing off my digital skills and using some graphics there. Anyway, the outcome is, I feel, with the new module, we can allow them the dialogue, reflection that relates to their critical thinking about their own experience that crucially interests them, rather than just saying, look, read Gay and Moon and Pollard and tell us how good you think it is. I mean, at the end of the day, we've all noticed perhaps anomalies between what trainee teachers write, what they say is the best way to do things, what they actually believe, and what they actually do. So back to the module. I can't evaluate the module without first looking at the intended outcomes. So here they are. They sort of reflect UEL's academic framework for master's level credit by adopting these three headings. I want you to pay particular note to that bottom one about the capacity to direct and sustain continuing professional development. Excuse me. So we give them a core text. To meet these outcomes, they get a free core text. They get a number of taught sessions which cover research methods, methodology, data collection methods, ethics. They even get chances to disseminate their initial thoughts and their research plans with one another, so it's a collaborative process. There's tutor support. Twilight supports on critical reading and writing. And I even pushed the boat out and gave them personalised video for learning opportunities, commenting by a video on their research plans. And here's proof. This is my YouTube channel. That's actually my office. There's Trip, that's Newbie on the bookshelf. Kings and Queens of England. Anyway, so feeling that I haven't analysed the impact of that. Some of them find it creepy, I think, to be perfectly honest. Okay, let's do some evaluation. So, first thing, of course, if you're looking at the success of a module, I suppose, is the pass rate. So, I've looked at pass rates for the M-level modules over the last number of years. This was becoming the reflective practitioner with just over 70% pass rate. And this is initial submissions, not final submissions. I'm figuring I wanted to demonstrate the result of our initial input. Our externals, of which there's one in the room, have commented on our initial pass rate. So it has been an issue for us. But as you can see, there's a general consistency with one anomaly there between 80 and 90. Unfortunately, this is the implementation of the new module, and you can see not only a drop from previous years, which I suppose is to be expected, it's quite a different assessment, but unfortunately, this is what I'm worried about, the fact that usually there's a developmental process. Trainees get more used to writing at M level, and at the moment that doesn't look promising. However, it's still being marked and moderated for another week, so that could shift, hopefully upwards. Next thing, I mentioned the NQT survey questions, which particularly ask about research activity. This is a chart, I need to explain it actually, which asks trainees about how well the module has helped them, or their training has helped them to prepare them for managing the professional development on an ongoing basis. I should have perhaps put these in different colours. They describe 3 different cohorts. This bar is the NQT survey for 2013, which actually represents the views of 2011-2012 cohort. In the autumn, spring and summer, these are our termly responses, and you can see a general upward trend there, an increase in the outstanding scores, the very good scores, and these are what we've done so far on our current programme with our current cohort, and you can see a significant drop actually. In fact, there's a drop in the same way that we've got a drop in the pass rates, we've got a drop in the NQT survey responses, which doesn't look promising, to be perfectly honest. I suppose what we can do is we compare the NQT survey, which is basically a summative assessment of the end of their programme, and this bar, a summative assessment of the end of their programme. That's broadly comparable, so I'd hope that the summer term responses are favourable as well. Next question, and these are the ones that relate directly to research activity, and these were new for 2013, so they were only asked this last year, and we've only, because it's a new question, we only asked it twice with our second cohort. So we've got the 2011-12 cohort, 12-13 cohort, 13-14 cohort. You can compare spring and spring, and they're comparable to some extent. Slightly larger, very good response actually in the current cohort, which is encouraging. There is that unfortunate downward trend following autumn this year, given the specific requirement for them to access educational research, possibly because they didn't feel we prepared them suitably. UEL perhaps doesn't subscribe to enough or wide enough range of academic journals, perhaps, or they aren't sure successfully how successfully they've actually done it yet, because they haven't had their grade, or they're more aware of the scale and scope of existing research having done their research, or they don't really understand the question because it doesn't quite make sense, does it? Let's be honest. But we're likely to be measured on this and quizzed about it. Next question. Now this is my favourite one, about the robustness of research. This time there's a squeeze on both, this year, a squeeze on both the good and very good responses, which sends a shudder through my very being. Particularly following the explicit need this time for trainees to consider the validity and the reliability of their own educational research. So I'm thinking this is more to do with their understanding of the complexity of the field of educational research, and actually they're more aware of the fact that we can rarely be 100%, well, we can't be 100% confident of our claims in this field. Note though that what's fascinating here, the NQT result, 2/3 of trainees from 2011-12 felt that we did not, we prepared them well to assess the robustness of their educational research, despite the fact we did not prepare them to assess the robustness of their educational research. We may as well have asked them to assess how well we prepare them to juggle elephants, and I'm sure we would have still scored some good and very good responses there. So the last one of this triplicate, understand and apply the findings from your educational research. Well, this is interesting. They've been asked to do it, and there's a particular squeeze. It's generally disappointing, I suppose, for me, because part of my rationale for changing was to address these and demonstrate the impact through this. But there's different issues here, and I'd like your responses at the end about NQT survey stuff. Right. I want to move on. So what I did, I asked some trainees and some tutors to explain this to me. Explain yourself. I asked them about the 3 strands, the knowledge and skills and understanding, to do with the outcomes of the module. And I've very rigorously, I mean, this is robust research, very rigorously, I've taken samples. The green ones are positive, the red ones are arguably less positive. This didn't really demonstrate the issues for me. Yes, there's difficulty with methodology, but we didn't hang on methodology. We used a term research approach. this was an introductory M-level module, so we won't expect them to get stuck into the details of ontological perspectives and epistemology, unless I suppose they were one of the stronger assignments. The ethics was given token acknowledgement, but it was generally broadly well tackled, except from my perspective, some people kind of saw BERA as ethics police, with laws that you must obey, rather than the ethic of ethics and research being soaked in ethics, that sort of acknowledgement, a real understanding of it. Okay, there's thinking skills, which incorporates reviewing the literature. There was so much research linked to the area and no literature about the subject area, contrasting views here, but the tutors were fairly positive about this aspect. Not enough information to tell me why those scores are dipping, but in terms of the practical skills, they took initiative, they were proactive. There was, I suppose, there was this issue of data analysis. I mean, we didn't have many sessions, and we could have spent many more sessions on analysing different ways to analyse data. So I'm not surprised that there was some uncertainty about that. But I think perhaps the issue came from the sort of practicalities of the assignment. One thing that almost all of them did mention was, how on earth do you expect us to do this while we're training to teach? And worst case, I suppose, I've heard since I joined UEL in 2009, this, why do we even have to do it? What's the point? Just tell me what I have to do so I can get it done and start teaching. But I think that's important. The way we deal with it is do the planning beforehand, help them with that, so when they're going into schools, they've got a very clear idea of what they need to achieve. And I like this. Take a long time to mark. Well, look, there's my data. Final slide, and I'd like your thoughts about some of these issues. I'm thinking of, obviously I'll be gathering end of programme perception data. I will evaluate their outcomes as well, look at how many actually end up passing first time and how many pass the module. And all this will go into my module leaders report, of course. But I'm interested in disseminating their work as well. And I'm already speaking to Alison about potentially inviting a sample of them to submit to Cumbria's repository. Well, actually, Alison wants to set up a journal actually for student work, so that we could forge the way ahead. And some of the work has been exemplary, using theoretical frameworks, really reconceptualizing their understanding of music, art, and the role of different subjects in their practice. But actually as well, what I'd like your comments on are how you manage, deal with, perceive the NQT survey results, and perhaps your particular experience of working with the new ones about the robustness of educational research. So thank you for listening. I hope there's something that you found interesting. Thank you. Is there any comments or thoughts? Thank you.
Just comments on NQT survey. Just bearing that we're all aware of the timing of the NQT survey, middle of their NQT year, possibly the lowest point for an NQT is when they do it. The other thing about it, I think it's been something we noticed before with English as an additional language questions that were large at one time. The more exposure you have to dealing with English as an additional language, the more you realise you don't know about it. So therefore, the less prepared you felt you were for it. And likewise, probably it might be that the feature you're seeing is that as the more you expose your students to doing educational research activities, the more they are aware of how bad they are at it, or don't understand it, or how much more there is to know about educational research. Therefore, because you haven't told them everything, you are obviously completely useless as a tutor. And that's the sense that you get from them. And
no tweeting that, please.
Yes. The other one, no, I'm not tweeting that. No. The other one, the other thought that came to mind about the NQT survey was that they didn't like their last placement, therefore everything about the course was rubbish. And I've had conversations with that. A friend who actually works in social work has noticed the same feature. He said that their department has gone from can go from being top of the list to bottom of the list of departments because of a few students who decided they didn't like the placement they had, and therefore that colours every grade, which might explain the other factor that when you didn't do anything about educational research, they thought it was good because they just liked you anyway.
Yes, quite. There's so many contextual
Validity
factors.
of the NQT survey, full stop.
And the whole methodology behind it. I was speaking to a professor of education at UEL, Andrew Ravenscroft, who said one year he sent out the perception survey to his students, and he had a really healthy response when he asked about how popular the psychology field trip away day was. In fact, I think 85% of his trainees thought it was outstanding, and there hadn't been one that year. It left this question in from the previous year. But this whole notion of the sense of enjoyment, the tutor, and yeah, yes, absolutely. Thank you very much.
I think in this really difficult context in which we're working, there's such a need for people across institutions to be collaborating and sharing ideas on this. And without doing a big advert for my session next, we're funding 2 projects which may be of interest to this group if you're not coming to my session, which is one we've developed, a university with funding from the HEA has developed a web-based app for student teachers to use to log their research, so you can put frameworks in and things like that. So, and it's going to be open source, so everyone can use it in their institutions and things like that. And it looked fab when I saw it. It's in early stages, you can adapt it, etc. And the second thing is, we've got University of Strathclyde working on how student teachers engage with research on inclusion, and they're doing an awful lot of pre-work about their perceptions of research, because I think you can't just dump research on students to engage with. Why are you finding this problematic? What are your perceptions towards research? And then they're doing an intervention with them on inclusion, and then they're surveying at the end to see how those views change. And all of that work will be open to everybody. It's not closed or anything. So I just thought there are 2 projects that might be of interest.
Absolutely. Well, what I'm seeing is some of the trainees have really engaged with this module, particularly actually those who are building on previous research from a master's or even undergraduate dissertation, and perhaps they had positive experiences from that. So really taking it through an ongoing journey, and I think would be more than happy to engage. Pass me, make sure I get the details. I'll make sure that it's really sold to them.
I mean, it's going to go to Bureau as well. So
Nice.
there's
See you
practical outputs and then there's research outputs.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you.
What was the biggest challenge for you in developing this module?
I don't want to say it was passing it through our quality committee, but getting an appropriate external advisor was tricky. The biggest challenge, I think, was, I suppose for me, it goes back to the practicalities. I really had to think, I'm committed to this. I need trainees to have a way to be free to explore their passion and their interests. Research is going to be a necessary skill, and I know a lot of the existing workforce are now attending things like Research Ed because they understand they're lacking the knowledge. They need to become practitioner researchers. So I knew we were doing the right thing, my mind towards for our trainees, but it's how to make it work. I kind of used this Ference wheel idea to demonstrate what it might look in practice to them. And there's hundreds of different conceptual frameworks like this, but basically I wanted them to do this. I wanted them to gather the data in terms of literature, in terms of reviewing what was already in the field, interpreting the data in terms of the literature and the existing research, and then planning to act on evidence. I felt that an evaluative interpretation of the data was going to be sufficient to demonstrate the M-level outcomes. But some of them took it through to, some of them actually followed a case study model, so it wasn't as cyclical, it was like a study of the context. Others actually did implement sort of small-scale studies, really, in their classrooms and tried to implement small-scale randomized control trials. So it even allowed that sort of flexibility, which I kind of think was what I was after. But some people I've spoken to about, they're saying, well, what sort of research is it? That's not action research. Don't call it action research. No. Very set in understanding of what research should or must look like. But but I suppose I'm talking about some of my colleagues who are helping me market. I think the only issue we've had there is somebody who's just completed their doctorate, who's still in thesis mode, and I don't think she was on the same wavelength that the trainees were in terms of their outcomes. But not a challenge. Not really. Okay. Thank you for the question.
I was going to say that quite often new questions in NQT surveys for knowledge, but actually my experience is that a key reason why students might give lower ratings to certain questions is to do with what they see and what they experience in mentoring at school. So, for example, SEN and EAL have often had low scores because at school that's something that's not being handled brilliantly, or that teachers are saying, oh my God, I don't know what to do. In the same way, we don't have in education profession research culture that means that students are likely to diminish the professional relevance of this kind of activity, and that's going to come through in their response to the NQT survey. And there is a kind of a simple answer to this, which is actually very hard to achieve. It's a bit of a paradox, really, and it's that we make the mentoring culture in schools less about competence standards and more about collaborative research activity, where mentors and students work together to develop each other's ability to use research as a way of improving their practice. And so my conclusion generally would be that it's to do with partnership, and the way that the partnership can centralise research activities that's started working.
That's really useful, and I think I'd like to draw the session, this half of the session, to a close with that. Just to say, it sort of feeds into the workshop that Andrew Reid and myself are looking at, in terms of the value of a teacher-researcher competency framework. And I think that notion of collaboration has got to be key. It's quite a broad term, isn't it? And we're back to practicalities as well, unless the school's culture is feeding down into it.
And I think partnership also has to transform itself into something else in order for that.
Thank you. Okay, last comment.
We have a similar unit, but could we do it in terms of its joint practice, so the students act as the educational researchers on a college-wide collaborative theme, and then somehow join it. We should start partly to raise in our minds a couple of the trainees' research projects that came back with last year and this year, or ones where they've gone in and the head had actually said, I'd be interested in finding out. And actually what they did was a little bit of research for the school. A bit like when I did my own NQT, she went and did a little action research project in another school for the head.
Yes.
And that's actually really powerful.
Brilliant.
What we've drawn out there.
But it depends on the SLT saying this is something you must go for, and I'll support you with that. Look, thank you. I'm going to draw the session to a close, and thank you very much indeed for coming along. Please drop me a line. Keep in touch with me.